Good afternoon. Welcome to Clarkdale Historical Museum, and we're in the main room of this museum, and we're going to do a virtual First Friday oral history. And our special speaker today is Phil Hess, who for 17 years was the postmaster here in Clarkdale. Phil?
Thank you. I'll try to do the best I can on this, but you know, at my age, I don't remember everything anymore. I'll start out by I give a little bit of background of my work with the post office before I came to Clarkdale, and then we'll get into Clarkdale and we'll take it from there. And at any time, if anyone has any questions, be sure to ask, because I'd rather answer questions than just try to talk.
Yes.
I started with the post office basically in Globe, Arizona in 1959 as a substitute clerk carrier, which means I'd done everything. I was an hourly rate, and didn't matter how many hours you worked, you got the same pay per hour. And I just remember about the third year I was there, it was a little bit short-handed, and the postmaster said to me, "Well, Phil, you know the whole operation, so you know what has to be done. So you work whatever hours, just be sure it gets done." So the 2-week period, which we got paid every 2 weeks, the 2-week period I worked 196 hours in that 2 weeks. But we got the work done. Anyhow, then went on in 1963, we had the first zip code came into action, or came into being, and I didn't have a lot to do with it, but enough that I made some suggestions on the program and so forth, which they accepted. And then they sent me to high schools all over in the area around Globe to brief the juniors and seniors on what the zip code was, so that they could carry on from there. So then I became a supervisor in Globe. I worked as supervisor for a while, and then they had a position that opened up which was a stamp supply clerk, they had me ordering all the supplies, postal supplies, for all of the towns in eastern Arizona, and I would order them and distribute them. At that time, we handled the food stamps too. That was the first year they had food stamps, and I handled those. My inventory was about $500,000, so that was pretty heavy, but I enjoyed it. And then they done away with that program, and then they said, "Well, we don't have a place for you now in Globe because you'd advanced everything else. So now we want you to move on and be postmaster somewhere." So then Clarkdale came open because Virginia Wambacher, who had been the postmaster here, had passed away. And so there was a vacancy here. So they set it up with the board for me to go and meet the board, which is in San Bruno, California. And then I was appointed here. So I was very happy to get here. I arrived here and took over the office on July 4th of 1975. And they were supposed to have somebody here to swear me in, and they didn't. So finally, 3 years later, I got sworn in. But this office at that time had about 350 customers. So then we just, took care of all the customers and so forth. And then as we grew, we had to put in extra boxes. All we had was post office boxes at that time, and they was right in where is now City Hall, the building there. which was a post office since 1919 until I got a new one in 1989. They didn't have enough boxes, so we just got some boxes that we hinged onto the wall in the lobby, and they could just roll them all out so you could get behind them and put the mail in them, roll them back against the wall and lock it, and then people could get their mail out. So then in 1979, they came along with the Zip Plus 4. And they, out of Flagstaff, which was a sectional center, MSC, which was Management Sectional Center, which is over all of the offices in the area here, basically in northern Arizona. They called me and they said that they had looked at my record and saw that when I was in the military, I was an aerial photographer and a map maker. And the Zip Plus 4 program, you'd be working all over northern Arizona, every office, and be working with maps. And so they thought they asked me if I would take the job. So I took the job, but I never would give up my post office, Clarkdale. I stayed, I'm still here, and I had Joyce Berriman, which was my #1 clerk, and I put her in charge when I was gone. I'd come back every 90 days. I made sure and done all the reports and everything so I could keep my office. But Joyce done all the other work for me. So during that time, I traveled all over. I really goofed, and they gave all of us a deadline to get our areas coded. And what that means is every spot in northern Arizona, it's got a number on it, and I put that number on it. And I had to travel all these areas to make sure that that spot was the right spot. So when I said I goofed, they gave everybody a deadline to get their areas done so that the program could work as they had scheduled it. I was the first one in the nation to complete the area, and there was only 2 of us in the United States that met the deadline. So then the reason I said I goofed, because then they said, okay, you got your area done, Phoenix needs help. So they sent me to Phoenix, and I worked for about a little over 2 months in Phoenix until we got their area completed. Then they said, okay, now go to Tucson, and I worked down there about 6 weeks, completing all of southern Arizona. So basically, I've driven every street and looked at every address at that time in Arizona. Then I come back to my office here, and I was here probably 2 weeks, and they said, hey, Nevada needs help. So I went to Las Vegas, and I spent about 4 months in Las Vegas and got all of Nevada completed. Then they said, okay, San Diego needs help. So they sent me to San Diego. I worked there for I don't know how long. Then I went to San Bruno, which was the headquarters for Western Region, and worked there for a while. And they said, okay, now Memphis, Tennessee needs some help. And I said, okay. So I went to Memphis, and and that was the reason they needed help in Memphis, is Memphis was the headquarters basically for the Zip Plus 4 program. And they was having trouble with their computers, getting the computers doing the right thing. So that's what I did. I worked with them on the computers in Memphis for, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks. And finally, we got that straightened out. I get back to my office here in Clarkdale, and I'm really enjoying being home in my nice little community here. And that was just about the end of 1997. And they said, hey, we need somebody to go to Guam. I said, okay, what the heck, I'll go to Guam. So I waited about 2 or 3 weeks, and I never did get the order to go. So finally I contacted them, and I said, hey, I thought I was supposed to be going to Guam. When are we going to get over there? And they said, oh, well, somebody that outranked you found out that we're going to spend 6 weeks in Honolulu on the way over for briefing. Then you go to Guam and do it. Then you come back and spend another 6 weeks in Honolulu debriefing. So they outranked you, so somebody else wanted that. I said, that's fine. So then they sent me to Boise, Idaho for more training, or for audit training. And then I just got back from there, and they sent me to Colorado, and I audited the program in all of Colorado. So that's all part of the history of the Clarkdale Post Office, because if it wasn't for Clarkdale, for being here in Clarkdale, that would have never taken place, all that stuff. So then I got back.
You said 1997, you didn't mean that.
Did I say 97?
Yes, you meant 87 probably, or
No.
77.
79,
Okay.
I just
79,
transferred that.
okay,
Yeah, 1979 is when it was over. The audit program we done in 1980. And then I got off the program. I was here, well, my first wife died in 1986. So I still went around different places in Arizona and worked with postmasters and stuff with the zip code and so forth. And then my first wife died in 96. And
86.
Flagstaff called me in the MSC office, and they said, we know that you need to keep busy, not thinking about, my first wife and so forth. So we want you to come to Flagstaff and set up the AIS office, which is Address Information System Office. And we want you up here every other day. And I said, no, I'm not going to drive back and forth every other day, but I'll come up and spend a week and room up there and then come back here. And so I done that for about 5 years, I think, that I went back and forth every other week. Then I get back here, and of course, Clarkdale is growing. It kept growing, and I needed the office. First of all, I needed it remodeled so I could get more boxes in it. And they finally gave me a remodel, but that still didn't satisfy it. So then I started working on getting the new office. And so it took a long time before we could get a new office. And so in 1989, we got the new post office finally over there, which was the old high school manual arts building. And so then I worked there from 1989 till 1992 when I retired. At the time that I retired, if I can remember right, we had, of course, earlier we'd started a route delivering to people the reservation and Lower Town, anything that was a half a mile away from the post office could get delivery. And because it was a highway contract route is what it was. It wasn't a rural route. If it had been a rural route, people that lived a quarter mile away could have got delivery. But they had to be at least a half a mile away in order to get that. So then we took in Black Hills and of course the reservation and Lower Clarkdale, Hazentkata up on the mountain there, and all the area between here and Cottonwood, basically. And so then when I retired in 1992, February 21st of 1992, as I remember, we had about 1,800 post office boxes and 2 routes. And there's about 600 to a route. So I'm thinking there was probably 3,500 deliveries. So it went up from 1975 to 1992. It went from 350 to about 3,500 deliveries. So I think that pretty well covers. I did have a list sometime when the 17 years I was in the post office. I looked it up and got all the information, and I kept a list of all the postmasters, their dates of service and so forth, and I always kept it just on my desk. Well, it's fallen by the wayside, and I don't know what's ever happened to it. I just asked the postmaster there now if he has seen it. He said no, he's never even seen it.
I'll look for it.
So anyhow, it's gone, but I can't remember hardly any of them. Margaret Connors was postmaster before Virginia Wambacher, and Virginia was there 7 years, I think, when she died. So, but I think Margaret Connor was there longer than that, and I helped bury Margaret Connor when she died, because her nephew was in charge of the funeral registry, and he was in Flagstaff, and he knew me and knew that I knew his mother, so he had me do some of the funeral service for Margaret Connor. So died. So that's about all that I can say. Do you have any questions?
Yes,
Okay, Rebecca.
okay. I failed to introduce Phil's wife, Sam Hess, and Sam's going to pry some really good stories out of her husband, one involving my mother, and they got I think this post office in Clarkdale got the most friendly post office in the United States award, and you'll see why after he tells you this story.
Yes.
Ruth's mother was a sweetheart. She really was. And I used to tease her all the time because she had a boyfriend that was in San Diego, or I think San Diego,
Right.
yeah. And they'd write back and forth, and I used to tease her mother when she'd come in. I'd say that I put that letter in your box, but it was so hot I couldn't touch it, you know. And I'd tease her all the time like that. Well, this one day, she come in the post office, and the old post office had pull-down windows. You couldn't do that too. But then when we remodeled, we put a counter line, and it's about that little taller than that. But anyhow, she come in, and I seen her coming in, so I was clearing the back, and I ran all the way up to the front, and I jumped over the counter, and I grabbed her and kissed her. And she laughed and hollered, and she said, "That's the nicest thing anyone has ever done." And I told that at her funeral.
Yes.
That story.
And she and Ralph were high school sweethearts.
Yeah.
Before that.
Yeah.
And then they each went their different ways.
Yeah, and then they got married, and I've seen them every day just about after that, because they'd come into the post office usually together and get the mail and stuff like that. So that was what was it?
Okay. People wanted to know how much their babies weigh.
Oh yeah, the doctors would tell them to come to the post office and weigh their babies because our scales was so accurate. So I've weighed, and of course in Globe before I moved here, I probably weighed well over 1,000 babies, I'm sure. So.
Do you want to tell about the nun?
Oh, you went to the school with to be a nun at one time.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Down in Glow, they had a school, a Catholic school, and of course the nuns was the teachers, and of course I was familiar with that because my mother was a school teacher years and years ago when all you had to have was a high school education before I was born, and then the Catholic schools had hired her as a substitute. So anyhow, these young nuns, the Mother Superior would bring the young nuns into the post office, usually 2 or 3 with them, and I'd flirt with them. I'd wink at them and throw kisses to them and things like that. And the Mother Superior, she'd just sit back there and she'd get so tickled.
She's not supposed to
You
laugh.
didn't mind, huh?
But I always had fun with whoever I had.
Yeah.
I come in. There was a couple,
Now that's Globe though.
yeah, this is in
Yeah.
Gold. I had a school teacher couple, man and wife, and they was the grumpiest people that I ever come in. And everybody said, don't even speak to them because they won't speak. And I thought, that's not the way to do it. So they'd come in, usually together, and sometimes it'd be just one, but usually together. And I'd say thank you, and I'd smile, and I'd greet them when they first come in, and so forth. In less than 6 months' time, they both would smile and talk when they come in. I said, that's what I needed,
Yeah.
to think that and then, when I left there to come up here as postmaster, I was no longer a window clerk in Globe because I'd been a supervisor, but I was still over the windows. And they both come into the post office and said, we hear you're leaving, and they wanted to thank me for what I did at helping them out,
Yes.
and so forth. So I said, that's great.
Where,
And so
where were the recipes? Was that here?
yeah, here.
Okay.
I had people come in and say, I want to bake bread. What recipe should I use? And things like that. And so I tell them what I do. I'd say, well, now this altitude you can get by with using this kind of flour, but don't use that kind of flour. Because I've done cooking all my life. I don't like to cook, but I could cook. Because my mother taught me how to cook when I was 5 years old because she had to go to the field and work with my dad. And so on the farm, and she said, well, I need you to teach you how to cook. Because I wasn't big enough to go to the field, but my older brothers and sisters were. So they could go to the field and work, but I had to stay and cook. So
It sounds like you were before the internet, you were where people got all their information.
yeah, that was about it. It's amazing the questions you get, and there's so many I couldn't know.
Because it's a small town.
Yeah.
And because
Yeah.
you know the postmaster.
Mhm.
Were there any frightening things happen that, like a fire, or was there a thing where there was a bad storm and a lightning bolt struck the building? Do you remember anything like that?
The only thing I can remember is when the school building caught fire and burned. I remember that taking place. And of course, this old, the front doors in the old building there was about this far from the threshold. And more than once I went in there and there'd be a snake in the lobby.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah. And they'd get in there, and then the roll-out boxes, the swing-out boxes that I put against the wall, they was up off the floor about so high, and then I'd swing those open, and there'd be a snake under there more than once. So And there was a matter of fact, twice there was rattlesnakes. And,
So you never got dead.
no.
You knew what to do with it probably.
Yeah, I'd get a broom and I'd get them outside, and so I didn't have any way to kill them, but at least I'd get them out of there. So, and usually then I'd call or see one of the cops, policemen that come by, and I'd say, hey, and they'd take care of it. So.
Do you feel like the post office has changed since you left it?
Oh yes, of course there's always changes for the good, better, but who knows where some of them are for the better or not. Right now, with the Postmaster General we got that is interrupting all the mail, which is ridiculous. I've seen many, I used to work with the postal inspectors a lot, and I've seen many people for tampering with the mail get 5 years or more in prison and $5,000 or more fine, and that the Postmaster General takes out all these machines, which is tampering with our mail. He should get 5 years for each one of those machines that he's taken out. But
What was the motto? Was there a motto for the post office people? Like the mail must get out, or was there?
well, we used to say that through rain, wind, and storm,
Mail must go through.
the mail must go through.
And
Yeah,
it's the old one.
yeah.
And
They
there
don't,
were,
they don't follow that anymore.
Yeah.
a point of pride, it seems like. There was a great sense of pride.
Oh yes, very much so. Yeah. The highest priority in the nation was the sanctity of the U.S. mail.
Very good.
Yes, and does everybody know that UPS brings their boxes to the post office to deliver?
Yeah,
That's something
UPS and
Which
FedEx.
surprised me.
They all because
Not
everybody.
all of them, but some.
They advertise, I guess, that their rates are so cheap, but they can charge people and pay us our rates and still make a profit on it and have us deliver it for them.
How long has that been happening? Is that
That's been happening for probably 3 or 4 years now, and
okay.
maybe longer than that.
But not when you were in.
No,
Everything
not when
was
I
in.
was in, no.
Was there ever any? I know we had the huge snowstorm in '67. That was probably before you were here. Has there been any other big snowstorms or something that kept you from maybe delivering the mail?
No,
Anything like
there
that?
was never any that didn't make it so we couldn't deliver mail. We'd had some snow and stuff, and
Not
and occasionally we'd have a vehicle, a delivery vehicle that had broke down, and I'd take my own vehicle and go out and deliver the mail or something like that.
And change a tire for somebody?
Oh yeah, when I first came here, they didn't. Of course, the service station up there in town had just closed, or had been closed for a while, and Mrs. King, who was retired from the bank, she was a bank teller here. She'd come down every day to check her mail, and she'd always usually park in front of the bank, and I don't know if she'd go into the bank and visit her a little bit, and then she'd come check her mail. She come into the post office one morning, and I was there alone, which I was quite often in a small office. And she said, I need to see if I can call somebody to come and change a tire for me, because she couldn't change it, and she had a flat tire sitting up there. And I said, what was her first name now? Catherine King, I think. And I said, Catherine, if you'll stand here by the door in the lobby, and if somebody comes in, tell them I'll be right back. I went up and changed her tire. And the first 3 or 4 years that I was here, of course, all these old houses had floor furnaces. You gotta crawl underneath the house to light the furnaces. Of course, because of the mines shutting down and there was just not a lot of maintenance people around here, that first 3 or 4 years, I must have lit 20 or 25 ladies' houses.
And no fires.
Fighters
Would they come into the post office and say, hey, my heater's...
yeah, I need to get somebody to, I'd say you just, I'd say Joyce was usually there, or Helen Cross, or Barb Duvall, one of my 3 clerks. And I say, okay, you watch, I'll go light this furnace for the lady.
Did something happen with Frank Cartwright? Reverend Cartwright? It seems like, you put a roof on
the church.
Yeah.
This church over here. One day I walk out to the back to look out the back door. Well, because that's where we got our mail in off the trucks. And I looked out the back door and I see on this church building ladders going up the side, and these guys that was in their 60s probably, old people, you know. So I see them trying to go up that ladder to do the roof. There needs some work done on the roof. So I just hollered at one of my clerks, whoever was there, maybe more than one, I'd say, take over. I went over there and went up and done the roof for him.
And he ended up marrying us, Frank Cartwright.
Oh,
yeah.
Reverend Cartwright married us.
Yeah, so.
Sam, why don't you tell us what you have wonderful stories about Clarkdale, because you worked at...
I worked at the golf at Peck's Lake, and I worked at, I sent golfers out and bartended. Well, basically did everything. And then on my day off, I came over and cleaned. And then somehow
How did the 2 of you meet then?
I knew him as the postmaster, and I thought he was married, and I knew Pat had died, but I thought, and he was going out, and I thought he was married, and he thought I was married, and we found out, and we said, let's do this thing. At the Elks. He was the exalted ruler, and I was
We'd hired
the
her
manager. Yeah,
as
the
manager.
and then
Yeah.
that's all she wrote.
I almost didn't hire her because the guy that recommended her and I didn't get along. So, and I was the exalted ruler and he was a past exalted. Of course, I had been exalted.
You don't need
one
to tell
more.
stories about people.
Well, I didn't tell stories. I just said we didn't
No,
get
what
along.
is it? My mom said you can tell the story or the name, but not both.
So,
Yeah. And I did write a little bit of a history for John Bell, and I think it must have been of the golf course of Peck's Lake.
Do you still have it?
I should, but I don't
Well,
know.
look, if you find also that Postmaster list, that would be a nice
Oh,
thing.
I would.
Even
Now
though
that-
we wouldn't maybe necessarily keep it,
Yeah.
it might go.
That might be harder, is the postmaster, because we had, when we moved from Iowa, we had like a 4-bedroom house with an attic and a basement. Now we're in a 2-bedroom house, and so we've got like boxes of stuff that our kids are gonna hate us for
Yes.
leaving it when we die.
speaking of John Bell, when I came here, one of the first people that I met was John Bell. He come into the post office and he had Western Union and what was the name of his store beside? Maybe Antiques, yeah. Anyhow, he come in and introduced himself, and anyhow we got talking a little bit, and he said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Phil Hess." He says, "I remember you." I grew up in my younger years outside of Greene, Iowa, a little town of about 1,300 population, maybe, or less than that probably. But anyhow, it's a little town. And the county seat, that was in Butler County, the county seat was Allison. And John Bell was a graduate of Allison High School. And his wife was a graduate of Clarksville High School, which is another little town that is in Butler County, and they are all within 10 miles of one another. So anyhow, John Bell, after he graduated from high school, while he was married, had come to Greene and run the newspaper there.
And that's close to where we were living in.
Yeah, it was, what was it called? The Greene Recorder. And he had a nephew, or I think it was his wife's nephew anyhow, from somewhere further away, the southern part of the state, that his parents had separated, and he needed a place to live. So he had come to live with John and Betty Bell in Greene, and he was in the same grade as my older sister. So I met him and got to know him, even though he's 5 years older than I was, got to be kind of friends. So he said, hey, Phil, why don't you come into town? So I'd ride my horse into town and on Saturday and help him melt the lead for the Linotype type machine. And I hadn't even heard of or thought of John Bell after I left Greene, which was in 1958.
Yeah.
And then in 1975, I meet him here. So and then I can't remember the lady's name, but she came in one day and she said, what's your name? And I told her, and she said, well, I think I've met you before, or I've seen you before. And I said, no, I don't think so. I said, where are you from? And she said, Norwalk, Ohio. And I said, oh, I trim trees in Norwalk, Ohio.
That's right.
I said, I cut the trees down at the library, around the library there in Ohio. She says, that's where it was. She said, and we didn't want those trees taken down. I said, the city did.
And I lived in Ohio at the same time, but my dad wouldn't let me go out with him because I was 8 years old.
So anyhow, then after that, I said, well, you've been out here all that time? How many years you been? Oh, she said, no, then I went to West Palm Beach, Florida. I said, that's where I was stationed. She said, yeah, I worked in the office in the department store there in West Palm Beach. I said, yeah, I've been in that store many times. But I can't remember her name, but she was a friend of, she ran around with Wambacher. What was the Wambachers' name? The lady, she was single, or...
Ruth doesn't know everything,
No,
almost.
no.
But
Darn, I can't think. But they was always together, those two ladies. And they'd come into the post office. But anyhow, I said, gee whiz, all these people that I had seen in all these years that didn't
Yes.
show up there.
Yeah, it's always nice they can remember you, but it's terrible that you can't remember
Yeah,
them.
yeah. So.
Well, we're just tickled that both of you could come and share these stories with us, and we want to invite...
relevant or not.
Oh no, they're all great stories. And we'd like to invite all of our viewers to come and watch us on the video and on YouTube. And soon we hope that this virus will be over and our activities here will flourish again. And we'll have First Fridays live for you. Thank you. And Nathan Porter is our video photographer.
Oh, great
And
to meet
also
you.
he's an archivist here. We
Oh,
do need
neat.
volunteers, so don't know what our phone number is, but we are around, and we would love to have you help us in any way you could think of.
You
Thank
can
you.
reach us by email.
Oh, email?
Email. That's on the website. They can go to the website and then
See,
find our email.
Nathan knows everything. I hope you all picked that voice out.
Very good, yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
Yeah.